We flew British Airways via London Heathrow to Miami, where Maria and Paul were waiting for us and drove us the 20 or so miles to Fort Lauderdale. We were staying in the Alhambra Beach Resort, a small hotel based in an old apartment block very close to Fort Lauderdale Beach. It's just a few yards down the road to the beach. Fort Lauderdale has a very extensive system of canals and waterways, and a good way of seeing part of this is on the water taxi. There's a stop close to the hotel. Another stop is at the edge of Port Everglades, where you can look at the cruise ships that happen to be in today. You also get to see quite a few super yachts. The route brings us right into downtown Fort Lauderdale. The Stranahan House is the oldest building in Fort Lauderdale, dating from 1901. We got off near Las Olas Boulevard for a bit of shop watching and some lunch, and then back onto the water taxi for the return trip. Seven Seas is the private yacht of Steven Spielberg, reputedly costing $200 million. North of Fort Lauderdale is Boca Raton, where Maria has her beauty studio. It's located in Royal Palm Place, which is part of Boca Raton that has a very European feel. On the Friday, Paul and Maria very generously drove us all the way across the Floridian Peninsula to Naples. This is a pleasant town with lots of nice restaurants and smart shops. A few miles north of Naples is Bonita Springs with its public beach. This, of course, is on the Gulf of Mexico, and the plan is that we'll see the sunset over the Gulf. Doc's Beach House is a local institution and supplied us with beer to help us enjoy the experience. The following day, our cruise starts from Miami. Paul and Maria take us to the port of Miami, passing Port Everglades, where one of the giant ships of Royal Caribbean is in. Celebrity Reflection leaves the port of Miami just as a thunderstorm is about to break out. And when the rain came, it completely overwhelmed the drainage system on our balcony. "8 days at sea to cross the Atlantic. We had to take a 300-mile detour to avoid a massive storm, and then we arrive in Santa Cruz de Tenerife in the Canary Islands." Tenerife is a very mountainous island, and the main tourist attraction is Mount Teide, a dormant volcano. But on this occasion we opted to stay in Santa Cruz, which is the main town of the island. Santa Cruz is where Horatio Nelson lost his right arm in 1797. He had just landed at the head of an attacking force when he was shot in the arm. We set off on foot towards the town centre. This colourful building is the Tourist Information Office. The Plaza de España is the main square, and we continue into the pedestrianised shopping district. This building houses the Parliament of the Autonomous Region of the Canary Islands. This is the Museum of Modern Art. And this is the market. We're heading towards the Church of Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. The church was built in 1498 and reconstructed in the second half of the 18th century. Spain conquered Tenerife in 1494, and the conquistadores landed near here. They carried before them a large cross, which gave its name to the new settlement, Santa Cruz. And that cross is preserved here. We've found our way back to the Plaza de España, and we stopped for a coffee nearby before returning to the ship. But there's time for a phone call home. It's a short overnight hop to Lanzarote, and we are berthed in the port of Arrecife. There's scarcely any vegetation on the entire island, and Lanzarote is still volcanically active. But again today we've decided that we won't go on a tour, we'll stay in the local town. Fred Olsen are in port with us today. The shuttle bus drops us near El Charco de San Ginés. Charco means puddle, and it's a small inlet from the sea. We walk into the centre of town, which is quite small. Turning the corner at the top of the shopping street, and Spain's economic woes become more evident. Some building projects seem to have been abandoned for some time. We're at the top of El Charco now, and there are some restaurants and apartments around. Reflection's ready to leave now, and we sail along the coast of Lanzarote for a while. Then it's 2 sea days, including an overnight passage through the Straits of Gibraltar, to Barcelona. But one of those sea days sees the finale of the Great Egg Drop competition. Teams have been constructing devices that will drop 3 uncooked eggs from the 7th floor in the atrium to the 3rd floor without cracking any of them. The target area is marked out, and the hotel director and the chief engineer are going to judge. Well, that was something different to while away a sea day. In Barcelona, we're berthed alongside Holland America's Prinsen Dam. The port shuttle took us to the Christopher Columbus Monument, and there was work going on high up on the monument. We decided just to have a short stroll around the Port Vey, the old port area, which is in fact now a modern shopping and leisure complex. Heading back now to get the shuttle back to the cruise terminal. An overnight sail brings us to Toulon, home of the French Mediterranean fleet. It was at the siege of Toulon in 1793 that the young Captain Napoleon Bonaparte brought about the defeat of the royalist garrison and began his own inexorable rise to power. We are berthed at La Seine-sur-Mer, just outside the city of Toulon itself. We are on a private tour arranged by one of our fellow passengers to Aix-en-Provence and Cassis. Aix is an ancient city founded by the Romans in the 2nd century AD. Its cathedral is also very old. The baptistry dates originally from the 6th century. The upper part of the baptistry, including the dome, dates from the Renaissance period. Other parts of the cathedral are Gothic. Leaving the cathedral, we set off on our walking tour of the city. There are many squares in Aix-en-Provence, most of which seem to be occupied by their own market of one kind or another. The Cours Mirabeau is a broad avenue dating from the 17th century, lined with many cafes, including Les Deux Garçons, which in its time has been frequented by Émile Zola, Paul Cézanne and Ernest Hemingway. An example of an hôtel particulier, an elegant townhouse. Now we rejoin our bus to continue on to the seaside town of Cassis. This ancient fishing port now exists entirely for tourism. The old castle is now a very expensive hotel. We're taking a short boat ride to visit the coastline around Cassis and go into some of the calanques or sheltered inlets. Returning to the harbour now, and eventually we get back to our bus, which has had to park right on the edge of town. A Mediterranean sunset as Reflection heads for Italy and Livorno. Joe has organised a private tour by minivan, sharing with 3 other couples from the ship, to visit Siena. Our driver Andrea brings us to the edge of the old city centre, underneath the massive church of San Domenico, and next to the old city well. From here we begin our walking tour of the old city, starting with the magnificent cathedral. Unfortunately, as it was Sunday morning, the cathedral was not open to visitors. Facing the cathedral is the Ospedale of Santa Maria della Scala. That's the end wall of what would have been the nave of the cathedral if the money hadn't run out. This is the Piazza del Campo, the main square, where the Palio horse races run every summer. The Fonte Gaia was built in the 15th century, but this is a 19th century copy. This is the oldest bank building still operating as a bank anywhere in the world. And here's Andrea waiting for us at the agreed meeting point to take us to our next stop, which is Monteriggioni. This is a walled, fortified hilltop town built in the 13th century as part of the defences of Siena's territory against the Florentines. Today, of course, it's just a tourist destination with a number of restaurants, cafes and craft shops. We had a very nice lunch with local wine at a traditional osteria before going to our last stop, which is another hilltop town, the famous San Gimignano. San Gimignano is famous for its medieval towers, of which 14 survive. There were originally 76. Other Tuscan towns used to have medieval towers as well, but most of them have disappeared over the centuries. San Gimignano has managed to hang on to at least some of its. The towers may have had some defensive function originally, but mainly they were a way of the families showing off. The bigger your tower, the wealthier you were. Time to head back to Reflection for our last night on board. In the morning we'll be disembarking in Civitavecchia. We're staying a couple of days in Rome before flying home, and we're staying at the IQ Hotel, which is right next door to the Rome Opera House. This was opened in 1880 but has been remodelled a couple of times, and the present facade dates from the mid-1950s. We start our tour of Rome in the nearby Piazza della Repubblica, which we've never visited before, but we've also never seen Rome with this much rain before. On the piazza is the understated entrance to the vast basilica of Santa Maria dei Angeli. This basilica is constructed within the ruins of the Baths of Diocletian, originally designed by Michelangelo in the 1560s, but he died before very much work could be completed. The vaulting in the transept is the only original work by Michelangelo still visible today. At the beginning of the 18th century, Pope Clement XI had a meridian line installed. This was partly to check the accuracy of the new calendar against the actual passage of the sun. Up here is the hole in the roof through which the sun enters, so that the passage of the light on the meridian line can be observed. Outside the basilica itself, you can still see much of the original Roman brickwork before it was modified by Michelangelo and later architects. From the Piazza della Repubblica, we head off on a walk to see where we get. The 17th century church of Santa Maria della Vittoria. This crossroads is called Quattro Fontane, and the four fountains that give it its name date from the very end of the 16th century. At the corner is the Church of San Carlo, designed by Francesco Borromini at the beginning of the 17th century. The Piazza del Quirinale. The Quirinale Palace was once the residence of popes. Today it's the official residence of the President of the Italian Republic, with a view across to St. Peter's. The Trevi Fountain, heaving with tourists as usual. Opposite the Trevi is a Baroque church now used by the Bulgarian Orthodox community, and nearby the Church of St. Ignatius of Loyola. This church was built in the late 17th century. We've now reached the Pantheon, where we always seem to come when we visit Rome. But this is the first time we've seen rain streaming through the hole in the roof. Originally built in the 1st century AD, the Pantheon was converted to a Christian church in the 7th century AD. Two kings of modern Italy are buried here. And this is the tomb of the Renaissance artist Raphael. It's still raining in the morning, so I buy a cheap umbrella by the hotel. We head off down the Via Nazionale towards the Forums, stopping first at the Forum of Trajan. Two churches face Trajan's column. The larger one is the Church of the Holy Name of Mary. Looking over the ancient Roman Forum. The triumphal arch of Septimus Severus. The Curia, the ancient Roman Senate house. Approaching the Colosseum now. There was a queue of over 2 hours even in the rain to get in here, so we didn't bother. The Arch of Constantine. On our way back to the hotel, we call in at St. Paul within the Walls, the Anglican Episcopalian Church of Rome. It includes work by Edward Burne-Jones and William Morris. Our last morning in Rome, and it stopped raining. We walked the short distance to the church of Santa Maria Maggiore. The church was built in the 5th century, but has been embellished many times since. This facade is from the mid-18th century. Inside, the scale of the nave of the church is huge. Some of the mosaics date from the early years of the basilica. The triumphal arch over the altar also contains mosaics from the 5th century. Under the altar is the crypt of the Nativity, which includes a statue of Pope St. Pius IX and the reliquary of the Holy Crib. This is the Sistine Chapel, where Pope Sixtus V is buried. The Baptistry and the Borghese Chapel. It's been over 3 weeks since we left home, and after lunch we're off to the airport to return.